The Vey child stopped breathing for the fourth time that morning, and the alien doctors put down their instruments and stepped away from the bed. Sira Janik did not step away. She watched the small chest under the silver film, watched the bioluminescent veins go from a slow blue pulse to a long, flat gray, and she counted to 3 in her head the way her grandmother had taught her to count before answering a door at night. On 3, she pressed the heel of her palm to a place no Veyran physician would have touched, low on the sternum where the secondary lung wrapped the heart, and she pushed. The child inhaled. It was a wet, ragged little sound, the sound of a creature surprised to still be alive. Around the bed, the Veyran physicians did not look at Sira. They looked at the floor, at the readouts, at one another, anywhere but at the human woman who kept refusing to let their patient die in the manner their textbooks prescribed. Dr. Janik, the senior physician, a tall, pale thing called Vasalith, spoke without lifting his head. His mouth was a thin slit running vertically down his face, and his voice came from somewhere behind it. The council has rendered its judgment. The child is unsalvageable. Continued intervention is no longer ethical. She breathed, Sira said. She breathed because you struck her. She breathed. Vasalith's eyes closed sideways. He was patient with her the way a man is patient with weather. Doctor, Illyri Vesh is dying. She has been dying since her hatch month. Her marrow does not produce. Her thymic node is calcifying. We have given her every treatment our species has devised in 9,000 years. Some illnesses are simply the end of a road. There are other roads. There are no other roads on the map. Then the map is wrong. He looked at her then, finally, and there was something behind his pale eyes that might have been pity and might have been something harder. You are not Veyran, Doctor. You do not understand what the map is for. She did understand. She had been on Outpost Threshold for 11 years, and she had spent every one of them learning what the map was for. The Veyran medical tradition was a thing of profound dignity. It allowed the dying to die. It did not chase miracles past the point where chase became indignity. It was beautiful in its way, and ancient and very, very tired. Sira was 48, human, a widow, and she had never in her life accepted a map. Give me until the long bell, she said. Doctor, until the long bell, then you can do what you came here to do. Vasalith inclined his head, which on a Veyran was a thing like a slow nod, and a slow apology folded into one motion. He filed out with the rest of them, and the door breathed shut, and Sira was alone with the child. Illyri Vesh was 8 cycles old, which was about 9 in human counting. Her skin was the color of wet pearl. There was a stuffed thing on the pillow next to her, a small woven creature of indeterminate species that Sira's son Lucan had brought down from the residential ring 2 weeks before, when the news had been bad but not yet final. Lucan had not said anything when he set it down. He had only put his hand briefly on the child's forehead, the way Sira did, and then he had walked out, and Sira had watched her son's back going down the corridor and thought, he learned that from me. He learned that touch from me, and I don't know whether to be proud or sorry. The calm chimed on her wrist. She let it chime twice before she answered. Sira, Payer's voice, low and warm, the voice she had let herself fall into a year ago when she had not known how to fall into anything anymore. Are you coming? I'm with her. Of course you are. A pause. The robe is laid out. Lucan has not eaten. The Korath elder is asking when you will be there. Tell the elder soon. Sira, he laughed very softly. It is our binding day. Soon is a poor word for a binding day. She closed her eyes. She could see him in the chamber she had decorated 3 nights ago with Ray's help, with the strings of pale lights they had argued about, and the dish of pink salt that Korath custom demanded, and the human cake Cly had baked which no Korath would eat but which Payer would tolerate because she had wanted it. She could see Payer in his ceremonial scaling, a careful inlay of silver over his throat ridges that had taken his clan mother 4 hours to apply. She could see all of it, and she could not move. 40 minutes, she said. 40 minutes. He cut the line without pressing her, which was one of the things she had let herself love about him. He never pressed. He had appeared in her life a year ago, in the worst week she had ever had, when her husband Tomas was 11 months in the ground and she was working 20-hour shifts and forgetting to eat, and Peyer had simply been there one morning, in the commissary, with a tray, asking if he could sit. He had not pressed then either. He had only sat, day after day, until sitting became something else. Sira looked at the Veyron child in the bed. The child's eyes were open now, the small slitted pupils watching her without expression. 40 minutes, Sira said to the child. I'll be back before the long bell, I promise. The child blinked once slowly. Sira kissed her own thumb and pressed it to the small pale forehead, and she went to be married. The residential ring of Outpost Threshold had been built by a consortium of 7 species, and it looked it. The corridors curved in ways that suited Korath bodies and were lit at frequencies that suited Veyron eyes, and the ceilings were high enough for the long-necked Tolan, who almost never came aboard anymore. Sira walked through it in her station coveralls with her hair still pinned for surgery, and the few people in the corridor stepped aside for her without speaking, because everyone on Threshold knew where she had been and where she was going and what was happening in both places. Lucan was waiting at her door. He was 14, or what passed for 14 in his unclassified physiology, and he was taller than her now, which still startled her every time she came around a corner and found him at adult height. His skin was a soft brown, and his hair was the dark coppery red of no species she had ever catalogued, and his eyes were the same gentle gray they had been on the day she had cracked open the stasis pod in the wreckage off Kelnareth and found him curled inside, breathing. "You're late," he said. "I know. Cly ate 2 of the small cakes. I tried to stop him." "I'm sure you did." "Mom," he looked at her. He had a way of looking at her, a stillness he did when he was about to ask something he was not sure he wanted answered. "Is A'Leary. She's holding." "For how long?" Sira did not lie to him. She had decided when he was 9 that she would never lie to him about death, because death was the one thing he was going to meet on his own terms whether she lied to him or not. "Until the long bell," she said. Lucan's jaw moved. He nodded. He stepped aside and let her go in. She thought about Peyer at the kitchen counter 3 mornings ago. It had been late, past second shift change, and she had come in expecting the quarters dark and found him still up, in the long soft Korath sleep robe he had brought from home, with a cup of human coffee in one hand and his clan script open on the table in the other. He drank human coffee because she liked it. He drank it the way a man drinks medicine, with a small careful wince at the start of each sip, and he had told her once that it tasted to him like something that had been on fire and then died, and she had laughed so hard she had to sit down. He had looked up when she came in. "You should be sleeping," she had said. "I should." He had not closed the script. "I keep losing the name." "Whose name?" "Yours, the 3rd syllable. In our cadence it lifts at the end, but in your cadence it does not, and I do not want to lift it on a binding day." "Peyer, it's just my name. You've been saying it for a year." "I have been saying it like a man who knows you. On a binding day I will say it like a man who is making a promise." "The shape is different." She had stood in the doorway and looked at him. He was a tall, ridged man in a sleep robe with bad coffee, and a script he had been rehearsing for an hour past when he should have been asleep, so he would not lift the 3rd syllable of her name on the day he made a promise about it, and she had thought, how did I get to be allowed this? She had not said it. She had only crossed the room and put her hand on the back of his neck, in the place the throat ridges thinned to almost human softness, and she had stood there for a minute while he kept reading. "Sira," he had said eventually, without looking up. "Oh." "Lucan is awake. He is pretending to be asleep, but he is awake. He has been doing the thing he does." "What thing?" "The listening thing." with his door open the width of a hand. She had glanced down the corridor. The door of Lucan's room had been, in fact, open the width of a hand. "He's worried," she had said. "I know. About me. About both of us. He is 14 and his mother is binding to a man who is not his father. He is permitted to listen." She had stood there a while longer. "Payer. Yes. I'm glad you came in for coffee that morning." His ridged hand had reached up and covered hers, on the back of his neck. "I had nowhere else to be," he had said. The memory came up at her now under Ray's comb, sharp and whole and a little cruel, and Sierra let it come, because there was no point trying not to let things in on a binding day. Ray was in the bedroom, fussing with the robe. Ray was 16, human, the daughter of the station's quartermaster, and she had attached herself to Sierra's household at 13 and had not really left. She had her own room down the corridor and her own family 2 doors past that, but in any matter requiring opinion she was Sierra's. "You look terrible," Ray said. "Thank you. I mean you look terrible in the coveralls. I'm going to fix it. Sit." Sierra sat. Ray began to unpin her hair. In the next room Sierra could hear Cly laughing at something, the loud, unself-conscious laugh of a 17-year-old human boy who had never quite learned what an indoor voice was. Cly was Lucan's best friend and the station's best unlicensed engineer, and he had no business being in her quarters before a Korath binding, but no one had ever managed to keep Cly out of anywhere he intended to be. "He's a good one, you know," Ray said, working. "Payer." "I know." He looked at the binding script for like an hour last night. He kept saying he didn't want to mispronounce your father's name. "My father's name isn't in the binding script." "He added it." Ray paused with the comb. "He said it should be." Sierra closed her eyes. The comm on the wall chimed. Lucan answered it. There was a low exchange Sierra did not entirely hear, and then Lucan came to the doorway with an odd look on his face. "It's the medbay," he said. "Aleari's stable. Vasalith says you have until the second long bell." Sierra let out a breath she had not known she was holding. "He's giving you the wedding," Lucan said quietly. "Yes. That's kind of him." "Yes." Lucan watched her in the mirror for a moment. Then he said, "You don't have to do this today, if you're not." "Lucan, I'm just saying. I am doing this today." He nodded once. He went back to the front room. Ray kept working on her hair, and Sierra looked at her own face in the mirror and tried to find the woman who had said yes a month ago to a Korath man on a balcony under the station's false dusk. She was in there somewhere. She came up slowly, like a fish to the surface, and by the time Ray had her in the robe she was almost present. Almost. The binding chamber was an octagonal room near the station's central axis, decorated for Korath ceremony with hanging strands of pale glass and a low brazier of the pink salt that Korath burned at the joining of households. 43 people were inside. Sierra knew most of them. Payer's clan mother was at the front in her formal scaling, and Payer was beside her. And when Sierra entered the room, Payer turned, and the look on his face was the look she had needed for a year and had not always believed she would have again. She walked the length of the chamber on Lucan's arm. The Korath elder, an old woman called Tessavan, whose voice was the dry rattle of a desert thing, began the binding words in the formal cadence Sierra had practiced for 3 weeks and still did not entirely understand. The form of a Korath binding was simple. 2 questions, 2 answers, 2 touches. The first question was asked of the joining partner, and Payer answered it, in the slow, careful basic he had been practicing because he wanted her family, Lucan, Cly, Ray, the people who were not Korath, to understand him without translation. "I will," he said. His hand came up and touched the underside of her wrist, where the human pulse ran close to the skin. His own skin was cool and dry and faintly ridged, and she felt the small, constant flicker of his secondary pulse, the one Korath had at the base of the thumb. The second question was for her. Tessavon turned and the dry voice asked it. Sira opened her mouth. She did not finish. There was no sound. There was no warning. The chamber simply stopped. The pink salt in the brazier hung in the air mid-curl. A child somewhere in the back had been about to sneeze, and her face was caught open in the half-second before sneezing. Tessavon's mouth was an unmoving Lucan's eyes, which had been on Sira's, did not blink. Payer did not move. Sira turned her head, and the turning felt slow, like turning underwater, and she saw the chamber gone still around her like a painting of itself. The light through the high windows had stopped striping. A bead of moisture on the rim of a water cup hung in place without falling. "Hello, doctor." She knew the voice before she saw the speaker, because she had been trained to know the cadences of certain things, and that voice had the cadence of a thing that was not, properly, in the room. It was standing by the brazier. It had the shape of a tall, thin man in a long, dark coat, with a long, pale face and long, pale hands, and its eyes were closed. Its mouth moved when it spoke, but the rest of it didn't exactly. It was a sketch of a person drawn with great care by something that had never been a person and had only studied them. "You are not here," Sira said. "I am here." The closed eyes turned toward her somehow. "I have been here. I have been very patient. You are a difficult woman to remove from a timeline." "What are you?" "I am an architect of the Pantheon. I tend the shapes of things." It tilted its head. "Your shape is incorrect." "I'm getting married." "You are not." The thing smiled. The smile did not reach the closed eyes because nothing was going to reach the closed eyes. The closed eyes were a decoration. "You are about to be removed from your post on Outpost Threshold. You are about to relocate with your new bonded to the Korath homeworld. You are about to do many beautiful things in a long, happy life that does not contain Illyri Vesh of Clan Ve, who will die at the second long bell with no one in the room who knows where to push." Sira felt cold all the way down her arms. "Why?" she said. "Because Illyri Vesh, who you have been so impertinent as to keep breathing, will in 31 years stand in front of a council of 17 species and convince them of a thing my pantheon would prefer they not believe. She will become a hinge. I do not like hinges. I prefer doors that stay open or doors that stay shut." "So you'll kill a child?" "I am not killing anyone, doctor. I am offering a woman a wedding." "Payer?" "Yes. He is genuine," the architect said, and for a moment there was something in its voice that was not mockery. "That is the elegance of it. He loves you. I have not had to make him love you. I only had to give him a year in which to do it." "A year?" "He died, doctor, 11 months and 28 days ago. A vascular collapse in a Korath trade clinic. I was there. I made him an offer. I told him I would give him a year and a woman, and he need only marry her on the appointed day. He thought it was a gift." Sira could not feel her hands. "At the moment of binding," the architect said, "the year closes. He returns to the place I found him. The marriage stands as a legal fact. You leave with his clan. You grieve in the way of widows. You have practice. The child dies on schedule. The hinge does not turn. The doors stay where I want them." "You're telling me this why?" "Because I am required to. The shape of things requires consent at certain joints. You are going to consent in another 2 seconds. I am giving you the courtesy of consenting with all the information." It opened its hands. The hands were too long. "Or not consenting. The choice is genuine, doctor. I do not cheat." "And if I don't?" Then he returns to the floor of the trade clinic 11 months ago, and the year unwrites itself, and you have never met him, and the child still dies on schedule because you are still here on threshold at the second long bell in your coveralls, with no road on the map. I lose nothing either way. I am merely offering you the road with the better view." Sira looked at Payer. He was caught with his hand on her wrist, his cool, dry hand, his secondary pulse stilled in the stillness of the room. His face was the face she had eaten breakfast across from for a year. His eyes were the eyes that had looked at her in the dark and not asked her to be anything other than what she was. "He doesn't know," she said. "He does not know. Wake him. Doctor. Wake him, you said consent at the joints. This is a joint, wake him." The architect's smile thinned. Then it inclined its long pale head, and it lifted one of its two long fingers, and somewhere in the air there was a click like a bone settling. Payer moved. He moved as a man wakes inside a dream and finds the dream has rules, and his eyes went first to Sira's face, and then past it to the thing by the brazier, and his throat ridges tightened in a way she had learned meant fear. "Sira," he said. "It's all right." "What is?" He saw the architect. His face did a thing she had not seen it do before. "Oh. You know it," Sira said. Payer's hand was still on her wrist. He did not move it. "I know it. I know it, Sira. Tell me." He told her. Not in detail, not in the long shape of it, because there was no time and time was not even moving, but he told her. A clinic floor, a cold, a voice. A bargain he had not understood was a bargain. A year that had felt like a gift from a kind universe. A woman across a commissary table. His voice broke on the last of it. Chorus voices did not break easily. He looked at her, and there was no scaling of the throat that could hide what was in his face. "I did not know," he said. "I know you didn't. Sira, I know." The architect watched them with the patience of a thing that has all the time there is. "It is still your consent, doctor. He is offering it now in full knowledge. The terms have not changed." Sira did not look at the architect. She looked at Payer. "You'd stay," she said, "if I said the word." "I would stay until the moment the word closed me. Yes." "And then you'd be gone." "Yes." "And the child dies." "Yes." His mouth did the small chorus thing that was their species' grief, a tightening at the corner. "The child dies." Sira felt the bead of moisture on the rim of the water cup as if it were on her own skin. She felt the unfallen weight of it. She had been 48 a long time. She had been a widow a year and a month. She had been a doctor for 26 years and a mother for 11, and there had been one morning in a commissary when a tall, ridged man had asked if he could sit, and her life had walked back into the room. She looked at Payer's face. She memorized it. She did not hurry. The architect was correct about one thing: it did not cheat. Time was stopped for as long as time needed to be stopped. "No," she said. Payer's eyes closed. "No," she said again, "I won't." Sira, Payer's hand on her wrist was very gentle. "It is all right. It is all right." "It is not all right. It is the only. Don't." He stopped. He breathed. He opened his eyes, and he was looking at her the way she had once seen Tomas look at her across a hospital bed when their first child had not come through. The look of a man telling a woman without words that he was going to bear what could be born. "I had a year," Payer said. "Sira, I had a year I was not going to have. I met you. I met your son. I drank human coffee, which is terrible. His voice did not quite hold. I had a year. Give it back." "Payer." "Give it back, doctor. Take your child. I had a year I was not owed." The architect cleared its throat, which it did not have. "If we are decided." "We are decided." Payer did not look at it. He looked at Sira. "Yes." Sira could not speak. She nodded. Payer lifted his hand from her wrist. Slowly, like a man setting down a thing he had been holding for a long time, he turned and walked across the still chamber to the brazier, and he put his hand on the long pale wrist of the architect, where a faint mark like a closed eye sat on the inside of the bone. "I rescind," he said, in a chorus formal cadence Sira had never heard him use. "What was given I return." The architect inclined its head. "It is rescinded." Payer looked back at her. He smiled. the small, careful smile he had given her over the commissary tray on the first morning. There was nothing in it that was a stranger's smile. It was the smile of the man she had let herself love. "Zero," he said. The chamber began to move. The pink salt finished its curl. The water bead fell. Tessavon's mouth completed its O into a syllable. The child in the back finished her sneeze. And the place where Pear had been standing was empty. There was a long second in which no one in the chamber understood what they had just seen, because they had not seen anything. They had seen a man, and then they had not seen a man. Tessavon's syllable became a question. The Korath elder turned, slow as a great old beast. Lucan's eyes were on Sira, and Lucan, who had been raised by her not to be lied to about death, understood before anyone else in the room. "Mom," he said. Sira was standing in the middle of the chamber in the robe Ray had pinned for her, with her hand still raised where Pear's hand had been a heartbeat ago, and her mouth open on the answer she had not given. She did not cry, she did not crumple, she had not done either of those things in a year, and she did not begin now. She simply lowered her hand. "The medbay," she said. "Mom." "The medbay, Lucan, the second long bell now." Cly, in the back, had already taken Ray's wrist. The three of them moved before the chamber had finished asking the question of what had happened. The clan mother stepped forward. Korath faces did not show what human faces showed, but Sira had been with Pear long enough to read what the small motions meant, and the clan mother's face was the face of a woman who had felt her son go out of the world and did not yet know how. "Janik mother," the clan mother said. Sira caught her hand, she held it. "I am sorry," Sira said, in the careful basic she had practiced for the binding. "He was the best of him. There is a child. I have to go to the child. Will you come?" The clan mother's throat ridges moved. Then she nodded, the slow Korath nod that was a thing like agreement and forgiveness folded together. "I will come," she said. They went. They ran. They did not run with dignity, which was not a Korath thing to do, and the clan mother in her ceremonial scaling ran beside Sira in the robe Ray had pinned, and Lucan and Cly and Ray were ahead of them by 20 meters and getting further, and the corridors of outpost threshold curved past them in their unfamiliar light. Halfway down the long promenade, Lucan looked back. He had the look on his face he used to get when he was 9 and had gone too far ahead in a crowd, and he slowed. "I'm here," Sira called. "I know." "Then run." He ran. People in the promenade stepped aside the way they had stepped aside that morning, and one of them, a small Tolan with a long pale neck, said something Sira did not catch, which the clan mother caught and answered without breaking stride, in a Korath register Sira also did not catch, but which had the shape of an apology and a thank you folded together. The clan mother did not waste motion. She did not waste breath. She ran in a robe of ceremonial scaling, and her face was the closed Korath face of a woman doing a thing because the thing needed doing, and Sira ran beside her in a robe of human silk, and she thought, "I have not earned this woman." "Janik mother," the clan mother said without turning her head. "Yes." "He spoke of you on the 7th day of the courting month." "Yes." "He said you would not have him if you sensed he was hurrying. He waited 4 months at a commissary table for you to ask him a question." "He told me that, eventually." "He told me first, I want you to know it." "I know it." "Good." They ran. The second long bell rang as they came through the medbay doors. Vasalith was at the bed. He had his hands clasped behind his back, in the Varan posture of accompaniment for the dying, and the rest of the council of physicians was around him in the same posture. The silver film over Illyrievesh's chest was very still. Her bioluminescent veins were the slow, level gray that meant the body had stopped fighting. "Dr. Janik," Vasalith said. He did not turn. "The long bell has rung." "Move." "Doctor." "Move, Vas." He turned. He looked at her in her wedding robe and her bare feet, and at the clan mother behind her in scaling, and at the 3 young people who had come in ahead of her and were already at the supply lockers, because they knew her routines and had known what she would want before she did. "You will lose your license," Vasalith said quietly. "I know. You will be expelled from the station. I know. You will be, by the standards of my people, a desecrator. I know." Vasalith looked at her for a long moment. He was very old. He had been a young man on threshold when it was 3 rings instead of 7, and he had buried more children than anyone Sira knew, and he had buried them with the dignity that was his species' great gift to itself. He stepped aside. "The map is wrong," he said softly, almost to himself, and he did not look at her when he said it, but he stepped aside, and that was enough. Sira went to the bed. The unthinkable thing she was going to do was a procedure no Varen physician would have performed, not because they could not, but because they would not, and no human physician on threshold but Sira was qualified to perform it, and Sira herself had never performed it on a Varen because no one had ever before given her permission to try. The Varen marrow disorder that was killing Illyrivesh required to be reversed, a graft of compatible stem tissue. Varen marrow was not compatible with itself across clan lines, which was why their species accepted the disease as terminal. They had no donor pool, but the human marrow, with certain modifications, was. Sira had proven it in cultures 3 years ago and had published the result in a paper no Varen journal would print, because the implications were heretical to a culture that did not graft across species. To put a piece of one being into another was, by Varen law and custom, and 3,000 years of bone-deep ethics, a violation of the boundary of the self. To put a piece of a human into a Varen child was worse. To do it without sanction, on a station whose council had just declared the patient unsalvageable, was the end of a career. To do it from her own body, which was what she was going to do, because there was no time to source a match, and the conditioning would take 6 hours and the child had perhaps 2, was the unthinkable thing. She lay down on the second bed. Lucan was at her side. He had set up the harvest line himself because she had taught him to do it on her own arm when he was 12, in the long quiet of an evening shift when she had thought he should know how in case. He had remembered. He was steady. "Mom," he said, "it's all right. It hurts. I know it does. You said you'd never lie to me about it. I'm not lying. I'm telling you it's all right anyway." His mouth moved. He set the line. The Korath clan mother had come to stand by the child's bed. She had laid her ridged hand on the small pale forehead, in the place Sira had pressed her thumb that morning, and she was making a low sound in her throat that Sira had not heard before. It was, Sira realized after a moment, a Korath prayer for the dying. The clan mother was praying for an alien child not of her own species, because her son's last act in the world had been to make the child possible. Vasalith came to stand at Sira's other side. He looked down at her. "I cannot help you," he said. "I know. I will not stop you. I know." He paused. "I will witness." She looked up at him. "That is also against your customs," she said. "It is." He folded his hands behind his back in the Varen posture of accompaniment. "But the map is wrong. Begin, doctor." She began. The room narrowed to the small, bright field of the harvest line, and the cool, dry air over her own forearm, and Lucan's voice, telling her vitals in the same flat, steady voice Cly was using at the console, which was a voice the two of them had practiced together one afternoon 2 years ago, sitting on the floor of the medbay with her watching, because she had told them that one day she might need someone to tell her she was bleeding without making her feel bled. She had not thought, when she had taught them that voice, that they would use it on her. The first cut was the deep one, into the iliac, and it was a thing she had done on herself once before for a paper she had written and never published, and she did it now the way a sailor reefs a sail in a storm, with the small, careful competence of a person who has done the thing in worse weather. Her hand did not shake. Her hand had not, in 26 years of practice, ever shaken at a cut. It was, she sometimes thought, the only part of her body that had been entirely on her side for the whole of her life. "Mom," Lucan said very quietly, "pressure." "I have it." "Sira," that was Vasalith behind her in the Varen posture of witness. He had not used her given name in 11 years. "There is a faster method." "There is." "You are not using it." "No." "Why?" She did not answer for a moment because she was working. Then she said, without lifting her head, "Because the faster method takes a Varen hand, and no Varen hand will be on the record for this. I will not let her live by a thing that costs another person their place." Vasalith did not speak again for a long time after that. It took an hour and a quarter, and then she gave Lucan the signal, and he leaned over her and put the sedative line in her neck with the same steady hands he had used on the harvest, and she looked up at him and tried to remember a thing she had wanted to say to him and could not find it, and then she was under. Under was not nothing. She had gone under twice before, once for the birth of the child she and Tomas had lost, and once for her own appendix at 31, and both times had been a clean black. This was not a clean black. This was a long pale corridor with windows on one side, and the windows looked out onto a commissary, and there was a tall ridged man at a table with a tray, looking up, mouthing the small Korith greeting he had used on the first morning. She did not go to him. She knew, the way one knows things in that country, that the man at the table was a thing the long corridor was offering her, and she could have him if she stayed and walked into the commissary, or she could not have him if she walked on down the corridor and out the door at the end. She walked. It was the hardest walking she had ever done. The corridor was very long. The man at the table did not call her back, because the man at the table was not a thing that could call. He only sat. She passed window after window of him, and each window was a different morning of the year he had given her, and each morning was a kindness she did not know how to set down. At the door at the end of the corridor, there was a child. The child was not a Leary. The child was the child Sira and Tomas had lost. The child was 9 years old, which was how old the child would have been, and she had Tomas's quiet mouth and Sira's hands, and she was waiting at the door because that was what she had been doing for 9 years. "You go back," the child said. "I know. I know you know. I'm just telling you." "Yes." The child put her small hand on Sira's wrist, where the human pulse ran close to the skin, and the touch was not a thing of that country either. It was a thing Sira's body knew from outside the country, and Sira came up out of the long pale corridor with the touch still on her wrist, and the medbay was very quiet, and the silver film over the child's chest was a soft, steady blue. 2 Varen junior physicians had come into the medbay during the 3rd hour, while she was under. She had trained them in the cross-species protocol in secret over the past 2 years, on the chance she would ever be allowed to use it. They had not spoken to Vasalith when they came in, and Vasalith had not spoken to them. They had only put on the surgical scaling and gone to the bed, and they had finished the work she had begun. Lucan was holding her hand. "It worked," he said. "How long has she been?" 40 minutes, Blue. Vasalith thinks she'll hold." Sira closed her eyes. She was very tired. She had been very tired for a year, and she would be very tired for a long time still, but there was a small blue light on the other side of the room, and her son was holding her hand, and that was a thing she could be very tired inside of. "Lucan," she said. "Yeah. He gave me a year." "I know, Mom. He gave it back so she could live." "I know. I want you to know it." "I know it." She slept. The first night she slept in her own quarters, 4 days after the surgery. She walked into the bedroom and saw the binding robe still laid out across the chair where Ray had put it that morning in the same fold, untouched. No one had moved it. No one had known whether they were allowed to. Sierra stood in the doorway a long minute. Then she went in, and she lifted the robe with both hands, and she folded it the way the Korath folded ceremonial scaling, in the 8 slow folds Pear had once shown her on a winter evening when they had been talking about nothing. She did not remember which winter evening. She remembered his hands on the cloth. She put the folded robe in the lower drawer of the bureau, where she kept the things of Tomas that she had not been able to give away in 11 months. There was room for it. There would always, she supposed, be room for it. On the kitchen counter, Pear's cup was still where he had left it 3 mornings ago. There was a thin, dry ring at the bottom of it. She did not wash it. She sat at the counter with it in front of her, and she did not drink anything. And after a while, Lucan came in barefoot in his sleep clothes and sat down on the stool beside her without speaking. He looked at the cup. "You don't have to wash it," he said. "I'm not going to." "Good." He did not say anything else for a long time. He had a way of being silent that was not, somehow, the silence of a boy who did not know what to say. It was the silence of a person who had decided that words were not yet the right tool and was waiting for the right tool to come around. "Mom," he said eventually. He left a thing. "What thing?" Lucan reached into the pocket of his sleep robe and brought out a small folded square of Korath script paper. He set it on the counter between them. He did not push it toward her. "It was in the binding script," he said, "on the chamber floor. After. The Korath elder gave it to me because she said it had your name on the 3rd syllable in the wrong cadence, and she did not want to give it to you herself." Sierra looked at the paper. "What does it say?" "I don't read Korath." "Lucan." "I had it read." He swallowed. "It's a thing he wrote out for the binding, the vow part, the bit he was going to say after the second touch. He'd been practicing it." She picked up the paper. She unfolded it once, twice, 3 times, the way Korath script paper unfolded. The script inside was the careful hand of a man rehearsing for a day he was not going to see, and it was a vow she did not need to read in Korath to understand, because she had loved him for a year, and a year was enough time to learn what a man was going to promise. She read it anyway. She read it twice. She folded it back up the way it had come, and she set it on the counter beside the cup, and she put her head down on the counter for a minute, just a minute, with her forehead against the cool plastic, and Lucan's hand came across and rested on the back of her neck, the way she had rested her hand on Pear's neck 3 mornings ago, in the place where her hair thinned to the soft human skin at the top of the spine. He did not say anything. He did not have to. He had been raised by her, and his hand on her neck was a hand that knew what it had been taught. After a while she sat up. "Lucan." "Yeah. I'm all right. I know you are. I'm going to be all right tomorrow too. I know. I just wanted to tell you, so you wouldn't have to ask." "Thank you, Mom." She put the paper in the drawer with the robe. She left the cup on the counter. She went to bed. The Varen Council met for 3 days. They expelled her from the station's medical register as they had to. They voted on whether to expel her from the station itself, and the vote was very close, and Vasalith, who had never in his career broken a tie, broke this one, and Sierra was permitted to stay. The council issued no statement about the cross-species graft. It was, by their tradition, a desecration, and they did not speak of it. But the 2 junior physicians who had come into the medbay during the 3rd hour returned to their posts and were not censured. And on the 4th day, a Varen clan from the southern continent of the Varen homeworld sent a private inquiry to Outpost Threshold regarding the availability of a procedure they had heard rumor of, in the case of a child of their own. Vasalith answered the inquiry himself. Sierra never saw what he wrote. Illyrivesh went home with her parents in the 11th week. She walked out of the medbay on her own. She stopped at Sira's bed on the way and put her small, pale hand on Sira's wrist, where the human pulse ran close to the skin, and she did not say anything because Varen children of 8 cycles do not, customarily, speak to elders. Sira kissed her thumb and pressed it to the small, pale forehead. "Grow up well, sweetheart," she said. The child blinked once slowly and went. Her parents came in afterward. They were a quiet pair, the father a thin man with the calcified blue along his neck veins that meant he had been ill himself once, the mother a small woman with the dark eye markings of the inland Vey. They had not spoken to Sira through the whole of the procedure or the 11 weeks of recovery, because Vey custom did not permit a parent to address the physician of a child whose case had been declared unsalvageable. It was a thing about not putting the physician in the position of needing to be thanked for an act the council had not sanctioned. They came in now without speaking. They stood at the foot of Sira's bed. The mother took from a long pocket of her travel robe a small folded piece of white cloth, and she set it on the rail. Then she lifted her chin and she met Sira's eyes, and she said, in the careful trade basic Sira knew her people learned only in adulthood and only with effort, "We will speak you to her when she is old." Sira did not trust her voice. She nodded. "All her life," the mother said, "we will speak you to her." They left. Sira lifted the white cloth from the rail. It was, when she unfolded it, a Vey hatch cloth, the thing a Vey child was wrapped in on the day of her hatch month, the most private thing a Vey family possessed. Illyri Vesh's name was embroidered in the corner in the slow, careful needlework of a parent who had embroidered it 8 years ago, expecting to bury the cloth with the child. Sira folded it back up. She put it in the lower drawer of the bureau, in the place where she kept things she did not yet know how to keep. The clan mother came to Sira's quarters on the night of the 12th week. She brought a small box of pink salt and a long carved stick of Korith ceremonial wood, which was the thing a Korith clan brought when a household had lost one of its own. She set them on the low table by Sira's window, in the place Pear had used to set his cup in the mornings. "He was my son," she said. "I know. He was the best of him. He was." The clan mother looked at the window, at the slow turn of the station's false dusk. "We will speak his name at the next clan gathering. We will speak it in the long way. There is a place in our naming for a son who undid himself for a stranger's child. He didn't do it for a stranger." "No," the clan mother's throat ridges softened. "He did not." She did not stay. Korith mourning was a solitary practice, and the bringing of the salt was its only social form. She put her ridged hand briefly on Sira's wrist, where Pear's hand had been on the day of the binding, and then she went. Sira sat at the window for a long time after she left. Lucan came in eventually. He sat down beside her without asking. After a while Cly came in too, with 3 cups of something that was probably tea and probably not, and Ray came last with a small wrapped thing that turned out to be one of the cakes from the binding, kept in storage because no one had been able to bring themselves to throw it out. They ate the cake. It was a little stale. Cly made a joke about it that was not a very good joke, and they all laughed anyway because Cly was Cly, and the laughter was a small thing, but it was the thing that had been waiting 12 weeks to be allowed. Sira looked at the 3 of them, at her son, her tall coppery son who had been a thing in a pod once and was now a man almost, at Cly, who was not her son but had eaten at her table since he was 9, at Ray, who was not her daughter but who had pinned her hair on her binding day and would do so again. Sira realized, if she ever asked, for any other ceremony she ever chose. She thought about the year the architect had offered. She thought about the long, happy life on the Korith homeworld and the road with the better view. She thought about a child she had let breathe 4 times in one morning, and had then breathed a 5th time at the second long bell, and a 6th, and a 7th, every breath since. She thought, I had a family. She thought, I had a family before he came, and I have a family now, and the architect did not know that, because the architect drew people without ever having been one. She did not say it out loud. She did not need to. Lucan was watching her in the window's reflection, and Lucan had been raised by her not to be lied to, and he saw her face change, and he reached over and put his hand on her wrist, where her own human pulse ran close to the skin. "Mom," he said. "I'm here." "Yes, you are." Sierra saw the architect once more. It was 4 months later, on a quiet shift in the medbay, and she had been alone at the long instrument bench cleaning a set of harvest needles she had used that afternoon on a Korath adolescent with a treatable thing. The medbay lights were down to night cycle. Outside the long window, the station's slow turn was carrying the Varen star up over the rim of the docking ring. She felt it before she saw it. She had not known before the binding day what a room felt like when something not in it was in it. Now she knew. She did not turn around. "You don't get to come in here," she said. "I am not in, I am at the joint." Its voice was the same long, pale voice. "The shape of things permits me at the joints." "Then say what you came to say." "You took a road that was not on the map." "I know. It is a difficult road. Difficult roads have hinges I cannot keep shut." "I know. I came to underline your name." A pause. "It is a courtesy I do not have to." "Underline it." There was the sound, somewhere behind her, of a thing like a pen being drawn slowly across paper that was not paper. Sierra did not turn around. She continued cleaning the needle in her hand. Her hand did not shake. "Doctor." "Yes." He returned the year. "That was a thing I did not expect." She lifted her head then, not to look at the architect, only to look at her own reflection in the dark window. She could see, faintly, the long pale shape of the thing behind her, sketched in the glass. "You don't know what he was," she said. "That's why you didn't expect it." "I know what he was." "You know what he was made of. You don't know what he was." The long pale shape in the glass was silent. "Underline the name and go," Sierra said. It went. She finished the needles. She put them in the autoclave. She turned off the long instrument bench light, and she crossed the medbay to the bed where Illyri Vesh had been 4 months ago, and she stood at the foot of the empty bed for a minute, with her hand on the rail, looking at the small steady reading of an absent patient on a monitor that someone had not yet switched off. Then she switched it off herself, and she went home. The Varen Council of Physicians, by a vote that took another 6 weeks, formally adopted the cross-species marrow protocol into their permitted procedures, under a Varen name that did not translate cleanly into human language, but which Vasalith told her, privately, meant something close to the road that was not on the map. Sierra was reinstated to the medical register on a probationary status that lasted exactly 1 shift, after which Vasalith quietly removed the probation and did not tell her he had done it. She kept working. She was 48 and then she was 49, and the work was the work. She trained more juniors in the cross-species protocol, and they trained their own juniors. And 3 years after the night the long bell rang on a Vey child who was supposed to die. A small pale girl named Illyri Vesh stood in the practice hall of her clan on the Varen homeworld, and gave the recitation that marked the beginning of her formal education. And she did not know yet, and would not know for a long time, that a thing called an architect had once tried to remove her from the world, and had been refused at the joint, because the human at the joint had had a family already, and had not been willing to trade it for a road with a better view. In 31 years, in a room on a planet none of them had yet seen, she would stand in front of a council of 17 species and convince them of a thing. Sierra would not live to see it. Lucan would. Lucan would be in the room. Lucan would put his hand briefly on the small pale forehead of the woman Illyri Vesh, would by then have become, in the way his mother had taught him, and he would not say anything, because some touches do not need a word and some maps are wrong, and some doors that the Pantheon prefers to keep shut are opened anyway, by the stubborn hands of a species that has never accepted a map in its life. The architect, in the place where architects keep their long, patient ledgers, would close the line on Sci-Fi's name and underline it once, the way a thing that does not know it is angry will underline a thing it cannot forgive. It would mean nothing. Sci-Fi would be at her window, on a station at the edge of the Varen belt, with her son's hand on her wrist, and the small, steady light of a child who breathed because a man she had loved for a year had given the year back, and a woman who had not stepped away when the doctors did had pushed in the place no one else would push. That was the human thing. That was the unthinkable thing. That was the only thing in the end that the Pantheon could not draw. It could draw a wedding, it could draw a year. It could draw a long, happy life on a homeworld with a balcony at false dusk, and it could draw the road with the better view, and it could draw every road that bent away from a sickbed at the second long bell. It could not draw the woman who would not step away. It could not draw the hand that pushed where no map said to push, and it could not draw the man who gave back the year he had been given, and it could not draw the son who held the line because his mother had taught him how. And it could not draw the boy who read the vitals in a flat, calm voice he had practiced sitting on the floor. And it could not draw the girl who held a small, pale hand for 4 hours without letting go. It could not draw what was between them. That was the thing the Pantheon, in its long, patient ledgers, had never been able to put down on paper, and that was the thing it had been trying to remove from its maps for a very long time, in the small, careful ways it knew how, by offering people roads with better views, and it had never quite understood why the maps kept coming back wrong. It was because the humans, when they came, brought a thing with them that did not fit on a map. They brought each other, and they did not, no matter how good the road, ever quite agree to leave.